Judge Moreno shot a sidelong glance at the restless child standing beside her mother. "Did you say hamburgers, young lady?" he asked, his tone surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the stern remarks he was known for. The entire courtroom froze, eyes fixed on the little girl, eager to see how she would respond. Lila held her breath, silently praying this wouldn't worsen their situation. Yet, Sophie didn't answer. Instead, her large brown eyes wandered to a portrait of a solemn-looking man in a wig hanging on the wall, completely oblivious to the growing tension. Lila's heart raced uncontrollably. This was spiraling out of control. But Judge Moreno didn't react with the fury she had anticipated. He simply shifted his gaze from Sophie back to Lila, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched on, making Lila feel like she was under a microscope. Finally, the judge broke the tension. "Is there something else you'd like to share, young lady?" he asked Sophie once more. Before Lila could respond, Sophie stepped forward confidently.
"Yes, sir,"
she replied, nodding earnestly.
"My tummy's growling really loud. We didn't have breakfast, and all this talking is making me super hungry."
Lila's cheeks burned with embarrassment. Here she was pleading her case, and her daughter was asking for food in front of one of the toughest judges in the city. That morning had been a whirlwind. Lila knew they should have grabbed a quick bite before court, but between rushing to get Sophie ready, handling school excuses, and battling traffic, food had slipped her mind. Now, Judge Moreno might view them even more poorly. Despite Sophie's honest, endearing nature, Lila felt they had made a terrible impression. Lila opened her mouth to apologize, but the judge raised his hand to stop her. Turning to Sophie, he said, "You know, courts can be long and boring, especially when you're hungry. Why don't you come up here and tell me more about these hamburgers?" His unexpected offer left the courtroom stunned, and even Judge Moreno seemed momentarily unsure. Sophie glanced at Lila for approval. Unsure of what else to do, Lila gave a hesitant nod. Beaming, Sophie skipped over to the imposing judge's desk, her small face lighting up with excitement as she climbed onto the platform before his chair, her eyes wide with wonder. Judge Moreno leaned back in his chair, calmly watching Sophie as she approached. His courtroom rarely deviated from its usual rigid structure, and yet here they were. Everyone sat on edge, waiting to see what he would do next. Was he still offended by the interruption? Would he discipline Sophie for her boldness? No one, not even Lila, could have predicted what the judge had in mind. Lila's life was a constant balancing act, juggling her job, childcare, and the endless struggle of making ends meet. Her 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, was a bundle of energy, and every day brought new challenges. If Sophie woke up coughing or sniffling, a sure sign of an oncoming cold, Lila's day would become even more hectic. That morning had been one of those days. Lila had to pick up Sophie's medication before heading to her bakery shift. Time was tight, so she hurried through her morning routine, packing tissues, mints, and Sophie's favorite stuffed animal to keep her comfortable. Bundling Sophie in warm clothes, she rushed her out the door, hoping traffic would cooperate. It didn't. Every light on the way to the pharmacy seemed to turn red, stretching a short trip into a frustrating ordeal. By the time they arrived, Lila was already running behind. As she pulled into the pharmacy lot, her heart sank. Every parking spot was taken, except for one near the entrance marked for wheelchair users. She hesitated, knowing it was wrong, but with Sophie coughing in the back seat and time slipping away, she rationalized. Just a few minutes. But luck was not on her side. What was supposed to be a quick in and out turned into a 15-minute wait as the line crawled forward. Lila finally retrieved the medicine and rushed back to the car, her anxiety mounting. Approaching her vehicle, she felt a pang of guilt for parking where she shouldn't have. Her fears were confirmed when she saw the bright orange envelope tucked under her windshield wiper. A $200 fine. The side of the ticket was a punch to the gut. For Lila, every dollar was accounted for, and $200 represented more than half of her weekly grocery budget. How could she possibly afford that? In the days that followed, Lila meticulously planned every penny. She cut back on gas usage, skipped her daily coffee, and made sacrifices wherever possible. Yet, even with her best efforts, the $200 fine remained an insurmountable hurdle. Reality hit hard. There was no way she could afford to pay it without jeopardizing her rent. Faced with a tough decision, Lila realized she had only two options: pay the fine and risk falling behind on bills, or take her chances in court to plead her case. The thought of appearing before a judge filled her with dread. The formal setting, the stern judges, and the complex legal jargon were intimidating. But the fine was simply too much to swallow. With no other choice, Lila decided to face the court, hoping that sharing her story might earn her some leniency. In the days leading up to her court date, she threw herself into preparation. Lila studied parking regulations, rehearsed her explanation, and practiced how she would present her case. Despite all this, anxiety gnawed at her as the date approached. Would the judge even consider her circumstances? Could she convince him to waive the fine? As Lila entered the imposing courthouse, its towering ceilings and stone-faced security officers only heightened her nerves. She had heard chilling stories about Judge Moreno, a man known for his uncompromising demeanor. The courtroom's oppressive silence and the judge's stern presence made her feel even smaller. When it was finally her turn to speak, Lila's hands trembled as she stood before him. Though she had prepared thoroughly, Judge Moreno's piercing questions threw her off balance. He focused solely on the parking violation, dismissing the context and challenges that had led to her decision. His voice was firm, his tone unyielding. With each question, Lila felt her hope slipping away. She feared not only that the fine would stand, but that he might even impose additional penalties for what he viewed as a waste of the court's time. But Lila couldn't have predicted how drastically things would shift because of her daughter. Just as she was ready to give up, Sophie, who had been quietly observing, suddenly piped up and asked for hamburgers. Mortified, Lila quickly apologized, explaining that the hectic morning had left them without time for breakfast. She feared this would only worsen the judge's impression of her, making her seem not just a negligent driver, but an unfit mother as well. Now, Sophie and Judge Moreno were seated face to face, drawing the full attention of the court. Everyone, including Lila, began to feel a deep sympathy for the small girl who was merely trying to navigate the overwhelming atmosphere of the courtroom. Judge Moreno leaned forward, his voice unexpectedly gentle, as he reassured Sophie that he only needed to ask her a few simple questions. His first was, "What kind of work does your mother do?" Encouraged by the judge's kind tone, Sophie confidently explained that her mother worked long hours at a bakery, crafting delicious cakes and pastries. Sometimes, she even took on additional shifts as a waitress at a local diner. The judge listened attentively, nodding as Sophie spoke, and continued to ask her a few more lighthearted questions. Through Sophie's innocent but heartfelt responses, Judge Moreno gained a clearer picture of Lila's life as a single mother juggling multiple jobs. At only 6 years old, Sophie was already aware of her mother's struggles, describing how Lila's exhausting work schedule left little time for rest or family moments. As Sophie spoke, a solemn silence fell over the courtroom. What had begun as a simple parking case now revealed a deeply human story of perseverance. The courtroom's perception of Lila shifted. What once seemed like a minor infraction now represented the greater challenges faced by a hard-working single parent. Sophie's candid words not only highlighted her mother's hardships, but also tugged at Lila's heart. She hadn't intended for her daughter to share such personal details, but Sophie's openness painted a raw, truthful picture of their life. The weight of the past crept into Lila's thoughts. Her role as a single mother went far beyond daily responsibilities. It was a constant battle against the scars left by betrayal. Behind her composed exterior was a history of heartbreak, the foundation of her relentless fight to give Sophie a better future. Lila had started dating Marcus, her boyfriend of 4 years, when Sophie was just 3. Fresh out of prison for a minor possession charge, Marcus had sworn he was a changed man, committed to leaving his past behind. He promised to focus on rebuilding their small family. Blinded by love and hope, Lila believed him and opened her heart again. At the time, she was carefully saving for her college degree, dreaming of a brighter future where she could provide more for Sophie and build a stable life alongside Marcus. Marcus seemed supportive, even offering to help manage their finances and assist with Sophie. Encouraged by his apparent dedication, Lila let herself trust him completely. But that trust was shattered one morning when she woke to find her savings account emptied and Marcus gone. The betrayal deepened when she learned he had fled with her younger sister. Behind Lila's back, Marcus had been having an affair, luring her sister away with empty promises. The pain of their dual betrayal was almost unbearable. Marcus had not only stolen Lila's hard-earned money, but had also abandoned her and Sophie without a second thought. Despite reporting the theft, the money was never recovered. Lila was left to piece her life back together as a single mother, her dreams of higher education slipping away. The financial strain forced her to take on multiple low-paying jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. This tragic chapter in Lila's life explained why a $200 parking ticket felt so overwhelming. Every dollar mattered in her precarious situation. As Sophie continued to share their struggles, the courtroom listened in stunned silence. Judge Moreno, too, seemed deeply affected by the child's honest account. He leaned forward, asking more questions to uncover the full extent of Lila's challenges. For the first time, the judge and everyone present began to see beyond the parking infraction, understanding the weight of Lila's story. Judge Moreno's perspective seemed to shift with every answer Sophie gave. Lila noticed a change in his expression. His stern, unyielding demeanor softened, revealing a man capable of empathy. For the first time, Lila saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes, far from the rigid figure she had dreaded. Then, Judge Moreno did something that left the entire courtroom in shock. He leaned forward and asked Sophie, "Well, Sophie, since your mom broke the parking rule, what do you think her punishment should be?" A hush fell over the room. This was completely out of character for the notoriously strict judge. Lila's eyes widened in disbelief. Did he actually expect a 6-year-old to weigh in on a legal matter? But Sophie remained composed, her innocent confidence undeterred. She looked at the judge thoughtfully and replied, "You're the judge, sir. I think you'll make the right choice." For a moment, silence reigned before the room erupted in laughter. It was the first time anyone could recall hearing such levity in Judge Moreno's courtroom. Even the judge himself couldn't hold back a smile. Sophie's honesty and charm had melted the courtroom's tension, transforming the usually severe environment into one of warmth and humor. But what would the judge do next? All eyes turned to him as he leaned back in his chair, appearing lost in contemplation. Then, without warning, he raised his hand and called for the bailiff. As the room rose in unison, the judge whispered instructions to the bailiff, who nodded before exiting through a side door. The courtroom buzzed with quiet speculation. A ripple of confusion spread through the courtroom as the bailiff returned, carrying a small brown paper bag. What could this mean? Judge Moreno took the bag with a warm smile, handed it to Sophie, and said, "Here you go, young lady. We can't have your stomach growling during court, can we?" Inside the bag were neatly packed sandwiches and juice boxes. Sophie's face lit up, her wide smile filling the room with a sense of innocent joy. Lila was overwhelmed. In all her struggles, she never thought she'd witness such kindness in a place like this. A simple gesture, but one that carried immense weight given their dire situation. After the unexpected food break, the judge resumed the session, but something had shifted. Judge Moreno didn't rush his decision. Instead, he carefully reviewed Lila's case, noting her spotless driving record and her otherwise impeccable history. This was her first parking offense in nearly a decade. When he finally looked up and delivered his ruling, the entire courtroom held its breath. To everyone's surprise, Judge Moreno dismissed the ticket. A wave of applause erupted as relief washed over Lila, lifting the heavy burden she had carried for days. But the judge wasn't finished. He reached for a sheet of paper and explained that he understood the challenges of single parenthood. On the paper, he had compiled a list of local resources for single mothers, including childcare support, career training, and even free online degree programs. It was more than Lila could have hoped for. Lila's eyes brimmed with gratitude. The dismissal of her ticket was no longer the most important thing. It was the unexpected compassion she had received when she needed it most. As she tried to thank Judge Moreno, her words faltered, unsure how to properly express her appreciation. But the judge offered her a reassuring smile and said, "No thanks necessary. This is justice, with a little kindness." News of Judge Moreno's actions quickly spread. Social media and local news outlets shared the heartwarming story of his gentle interaction with Sophie and his decision to help Lila. The community was astonished by the judge's unexpected leniency and genuine concern for their struggles. With the ticket behind her and armed with the resources Judge Moreno provided, Lila felt a renewed sense of hope. She enrolled in the online degree program, confident that Sophie would be well cared for with the child care support she had accessed. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so daunting. This experience changed more than just Lila's life. It deeply impacted Judge Moreno as well. His encounter with Lila and Sophie reignited a long-lost empathy within him. He came to understand that while the law is essential, its true purpose is to protect and uplift the vulnerable, not simply to enforce rules. True justice is not just about enforcing rules, but understanding the people behind them. Judge Moreno's transformation reminds us that compassion can change lives, even in the most rigid systems. Lila's struggle highlights the silent battles many face daily, and Sophie's innocence shows how simple honesty can open hearts. We are reminded that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect. In a world often driven by judgment and penalties, empathy and understanding have the power to create hope and inspire new beginnings. Have you ever experienced something similar with the justice system? Share your story in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.